Hello and welcome everyone to our first ever virtual Web Stories workshop. We're very excited to be here today and teach you all about the Web Stories format, and we hope you're excited too.
We've got a handful of speakers who are going to be joining us over the next couple of hours to teach you everything you need to know about web stories so that you can then go and create your very own story. There's a lot to cover today, so we recommend taking notes on the side, but we'll also have a Q&A session later on, which we'll give more details on in a minute or two. First, a little bit about ourselves.
My name is Alex Duran, and I'm an Associate Product Marketing Manager on the Google Web Creators team.
And my name is Chanel Garcia, and I'm a Product Marketing Manager on the Google Web Creators team as well. I know I speak for the both of us when I say that we're thrilled to be your MCs for today's sessions.
Our team is all about helping anyone on the web who creates content be successful. Whether you're a blogger, a journalist, a business owner, or anyone else really, we aim to create a place where people creating for the web can learn, be inspired, and grow as a community. But enough about us. Today is all about you. So let's take a look at who's here today.
We've got over 100 people from all over the world joining us today. Many of you are content creators, content publishers, and we even have a few agencies and businesses in attendance. Whether you're attending from your home or from an office, we also want to acknowledge that while the pandemic situation has improved for some countries in the last few months, many countries continue to struggle with rising cases. We hope you are all staying safe. Now I'm handing it back to Alex, who's going to walk you through some of our logistics for today.
Thanks, Chanel. Now, as Chanel mentioned, there are over 100 applicants attending today, so we want to make sure that we set up some ground rules so that everyone has the best possible experience. For most of today's sessions, you'll be watching right here on this event page. If any questions about web stories come up while we're presenting, we encourage you to use the Q&A feature within the platform. You can type your answers in and even upvote other folks' similar questions. All these questions get saved on our end, and we'll have a dedicated session later on to get the most out of your questions. If for whatever reason we don't have time to get to your questions today, we'll follow up over email in the next week. I also want to mention that per our company policy, we can't answer any questions related to SEO.
Now that you know how to get your questions answered, let's give a brief overview of what you'll be learning today. Now, you probably all already know this, but today is all about web stories, which allow you to engage your audience like never before with richer and more intimate content that you have total control over. We'll dig into the specifics of web stories in a bit, but let's take a look at today's schedule first. We'll start off today doing a deep dive into everything you need to know about what web stories are, why they're great for your brand and content, and how you can get started creating today. After that, we'll break out into 2 sessions to learn either the Web Stories for WordPress plugin or MakeStories, both tools that easily help you create web stories. And finally, we'll hear from the design director at Forbes, who has been using web stories to bring new life to their editorial content.
Thanks for the rundown, Chanel. And with that, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Raunak Mahesh, who works on the Global Product Partnerships team here at Google. Off to you, Raunak.
Awesome. Thank you for the intro, Alex, and so great to be here with you all. As Alex mentioned, my name is Raunak, and I work here in Global Product Partnerships. I just want to say this is one of my favorite parts of my job is getting to share all of the exciting things that we're working on here at Google with you creators. And I think we saw on the slide with the map, we have folks from all over the world here. So welcome, it's going to be fun, and let's kick things off. So with that, we're going to give an intro to web stories, and we'll cover what web stories are, why you can use web stories, as well as creation best practices, and how you can get web stories onto your site. Let's get right into it. Awesome. So what are stories? Let's start with that basic question. You probably know about stories on other platforms and have probably even made a few stories yourself. They're very visual, media forward, and tappable content that let you engage with new users and grow your existing audiences. They have swipe features that allow you to move between different stories, and that's a behavior that billions of users have come to know. So we think that stories format has way more potential that we want to tap into, and we're excited to share with you how you can also start using that. When you take that same format that's familiar on other platforms and then supercharge it with the benefits of the web, you create a whole new opportunity to engage with your audience. We don't just think this. We also have studies that show that when you show a user a regular text article that they scroll through, 64% of those respondents actually prefer to see visual content. Many of you folks as bloggers have likely seen a shift towards more visual content that performs strongly on your blogs. And WebStories is an extension of that to allow you to provide your audiences with modern formats. So we think it's a great way to capture high quality bite-sized content that's informational and fun at the same time. However, the stories you know today, there are some limitations. When you create on a walled garden, a lot of times the stories are ephemeral in nature, so they might not be evergreen and show up whenever a user or an audience wants to see that content. So that's one of the key benefits of web stories, is that the content is evergreen. So you can access it at any time, and we'll get into some more of those benefits as well on future slides. Cool, so with that, let's introduce web stories. So it's a new way for users to consume your articles and blogs in the familiar story format. Under the hood, web stories are just regular web pages, but you won't even realize thanks to the visual, non-code nature of the tools that we'll be using to build them. So as you can see, USA Today, they had written an article here about life on Mars. You can imagine if you're on your mobile phone and you're scrolling through that article, there'd be a lot of text. And this is an example of how you can take that same article and apply it into the web stories format. When I think about outer space, it's so vast, it's very visual in nature. And this really shows how you can grab your audience's attention in a way that you just can't do with a standard article. And we'll show you some examples from creators like yourself as well on the next slide. Cool, so here's an example of a web story from a creator. So as you can see, this story shows an image that captures the audience's attention. And then once they click on that cover page and go into the story, they're able to see that same type of content that might live on your blog in a web stories format. At a high level, web stories belong to you. So this shows you some of the benefits of using web stories. They're hosted on your website, which means you have full control over the content and you can monetize on your own terms. You can also outlink to your sites so that you can capture new audiences' attention and then link them to your blogs and your channels so that you help grow your brand and your audience. The other piece that is really important here is because it's hosted on your site, the content is as ephemeral or evergreen as you want. So you have full control over how that content lives on your site as well as on the web. Okay, cool. So why web stories? So web stories have the opportunity to bring in a new audience and more traffic to your own website or any other channel that you want to point it to. And like I mentioned before, stories give you the chance to earn revenue from ads as well as affiliate links. So there's multiple ways that you can monetize your content. So where do these stories show up? The web stories will show up on multiple Google services, which we'll cover in detail on the next few slides. But there's also the ability to embed stories onto your own blog, bringing a more modern and visual feel to your website. You can see on this slide a few of the search queries that people looked into to actually trigger what web stories would look like on search as well as Discover. And here we'll get into detail on exactly what Discover is. So Discover is the proactive feed that is below search if you download the Google app on iOS, or if you have an Android, it's native when you use Google search. So it's personalized content. You might see news articles, you might see web stories in a carousel or standalone articles, and all sorts of other content. So it's a massive audience that you can tap into and start to grow your brand. Cool. So here are a couple examples of what it looks like. So I know I mentioned there's a carousel, so you can see on the mock on the left, that's what it looks like when you see the stories carousel. And on the right, you can see a standalone stories article there that you can click on and check out. And Discover is active in India, Brazil, as well as the US. Now that you know a bit about web stories, I'm really excited to introduce my colleague Shishir, who's going to talk to you about how to actually get started creating web stories. With that, Shishir, take it away.
Hello, everyone. I'm Shishir, and I'm a web ecosystem consultant here at Google. My team's mission is to help creators like yourselves become successful with building web stories. And I'm super excited to be here and look forward to our upcoming sessions. So now that you know what web stories are and how they might surface, let's dive into the creative process of building web stories. At a high level, building a web story is all about creating a compelling story arc, one that has a definitive start and finish, and then uses content to tie the two together. We've done some analysis and found that stories that have incomplete narratives perform poorly as compared to those that tell the full story. Next, as you're flushing out your idea, make sure that you're doing the necessary interviews and researching topics or news stories so that data is accurate. Because when it's not, people will complain. If you're thinking of doing a list of items or a list of places, prepare a storyboard and think about what content fits well with different parts of your story. Or if you're planning a recipe, break it down into its constituent steps, but make sure to give an overview at the end. Remember, visual content is key. The more media forward your stories are, the more engagement you'll get from your users. On the right, we have some thought starters and sample story types to help inspire you. But please, don't be bound by just these. Think out of the box and tell your story in the way that your audience will find the most compelling. Now, we like to think of web stories as writing a blog, but backwards. So start with the visuals that will best and most vibrantly tell your story, and then only add in text to clarify the narrative. Again, your media should be the hero. Build a complete narrative, and we suggest stories between 10 to 15 pages long. These are not hard limits, but we recommend against 2 to 3 page stories and definitely against 20 or more, as at that point you've lost the user's attention. Also, as we said before, the more video content, the better. In fact, we'd even recommend at least one video per story and try to limit video to about 15 to 30 seconds per story page. If you have longer content, consider breaking it down into smaller chunks. And always make sure that the video fits the narrative and style and isn't simply forced into the story. Finally, original content shot by you is going to connect the best with users. But from time to time, using stock content is fine as well. Now, there are a number of tools available to help you build great web stories. On the right are some of the most popular options that we've seen creators use. Also later, we'll be diving a bit deeper and getting our hands dirty with MakeStories and the Web Stories for WordPress plugin. So stay tuned. So now let's shift gears a little and talk about some of the recommended best practices in building web stories. These will help make sure that your story stands out and delights your readers. We highly recommend that you have a clear first or cover page of your story and a clear last or closing page. The cover page is similar to the one on the left. Make sure that it has your branding or logo so that readers can identify you. Also, ensure that it has the name of your blog or website and a clear title. These help prepare the user for the slides coming up next. Similarly, on the last page, make sure that you include your logo or branding. Having a last or closing page avoids abrupt endings for users and gives them a sense of closure. It's also a way for them to jump off into other content you own or into other experiences you want them to see. The example on the right, for example, invites users to learn more about meditation. So next, it's important to distinguish the poster from the cover page of the story, a concept that can cause some confusion. So the poster is essentially an image file like a JPEG or a PNG. It is what we will use when your story shows up in the Discover carousel or in Google search. So for example, in the image on the left, the poster is the image of the girl in the white dress. Now we automatically layer in things like your logo, the title of your story, the name of your blog on top of the poster before showing it to users. So make sure not to burn any of that directly into the poster. Otherwise, it will hamper readability and hence engagement from your audience. Now, if you were to click on this poster when it shows up in your carousel or Google search, the web story would open up to the first page, or as seen earlier, the cover page of the story. This is the image on the right. Now, instead of just an image, you have the full editorial toolset at your disposal. So very simply, the cover could just be the exact same image as the poster, or alternatively, a video or some animation, as in the example here. But make sure that the poster and the cover page are at least similar, if not the same. This avoids confusing reader when they click on the poster and see a completely different experience than they were expecting. Let's further break down that poster into its various anatomical components. On the right, we've zoomed in on a card that you might expect to show up when a story surfaces in Discover or in Google search. As you build your stories, the tools that you use will automatically prompt you to set crucial metadata on the story. It is important that you don't ignore and actually follow these prompts and set this metadata. The first prompt that you will get is for your poster image. This is a 3:4 image that is at least 640 by 853 pixels in dimension. Make sure, as I mentioned earlier, that it has no text burnt into it, as when artifacts are rendered on top of the poster, it might make everything unreadable. The second prompt you will get is for your logo. This is a 1:1 image that is at least 96 pixels by 96 pixels. And as you can see, when you've set this appropriately, it will automatically be rendered on the top left of your card. What is great is that most tools only require you to set this once. So when configured, you don't need to set it for every story you create. The third prompt will be for the title of your story. Make sure this is engaging and descriptive enough for the user while sticking to under 70 characters long. This ensures that the title is not abruptly cut off. Finally, you will be asked to set the name of your blog or website. This too can most often be set only once and adjusted only when needed. All these artifacts get rendered just like on the card on the right, and hence explain why it's so important that you set these correctly. Now, while web stories work on all devices and layouts, they're really optimally viewed on a mobile device. So make sure you design them mobile first. Try to format videos and images to a vertical portrait format where possible. Ensure that you maintain a 9:16 aspect ratio, as that is what you'll find on most mobile devices. Ideally, you want to capture your content in this vertical portrait format. However, we know that's not always possible. So when you do crop your photos down, as you can see on the image on the right, make sure you highlight the most essential part of the image to provide a more definitive visual focal point. Also, as you edit videos, place them on different pages, making sure that they don't abruptly end. Ensure that there are logical cutoff points between different pages and videos. Now, to keep your story visually appealing, avoid large walls of text. Ideally, content should be less than 280 characters per page, or about the length of a tweet. But I'd say even shorter is better. The image on the left is something you should never do. It's hard to read, overlaps with a lot of the visual content on the page, and hugs the edges of the page, which might cause issues like the text being cut off on some mobile devices, as we'll see in a bit. The one in the middle is probably at the boundary of what might be okay for users. While it does conform to that 280 character limit, it is still a little hard to see as the text is very small. What is ideal is the example on the right. Enough text that it doesn't block out the main visual content and provides sufficient context that the user gets the information that you're trying to convey. The text is visible and contrasted well. And while we don't mean to curtail your narrative and storytelling flair, we really encourage you to experiment with different layouts, text sizes, fonts, and elements to see what works best for you. Now, make sure that your content is accessible for everyone. Be wary of how text contrasts against story backgrounds and images. Either position text appropriately or add a scrim layer, background, fill, or highlight to really make text or assets stand out. With the examples of the moon landing on the left, simply changing the contrast of the image makes the text really stand out. While in the example on the right, the red highlight helps differentiate the text from the similarly colored background image. Also, try to close caption your video content so that all users can enjoy your stories. A crucial aspect of building web stories is making sure they look good for all of your users. This means that someone on the latest iPhone or Pixel device gets the same experience as someone using a Moto G4 or a smaller size device. You can accomplish this by always staying within a given tool's or editor's safe zones. The design canvas for most tools will often highlight the limits of where you can place text, and staying within these boundaries guarantees that the story artifacts are shown correctly to all users by avoiding unintentional overflowing or cut-off text. Finally, videos. Not only have we seen this for ourselves, but a number of creators like you have told us how web stories and content with videos far outperform content without them. So make sure you try to include video content in your stories. However, be sure that it fits with your narrative and isn't simply thrown in. Videos and stories can be used in a multitude of ways. We have some examples on the right. The one from Vice showcases a story that can be video only, while the one from Pop Sugar uses a first-person narrative to draw the user into the content. The instructional video from Jump Rope, the one that's number 3, made by a creator just like you, is one that a lot of creators that have joined today will find very relatable. Showing a video for each step of an exercise is so much more engaging and useful to a reader than simply an image or a description of what to do. And then finally, the image on the right is an example of how images and different formats of video, both portrait and horizontal, can all be combined for a compelling storytelling experience. We'll make sure to share out all of these stories after our session today. But if you'd like to check these out right now, please visit our showcase at stories.google. Now, when creating and using videos, make sure to optimize them so that users don't have to wait around for slow loading videos, or worse, ones that don't load at all. We recommend using videos that are 720p in quality and are shot at 24 frames per second. All right, so here's a summary of some of the best practices we've covered today. Use a high quality cover photo, an interesting title, and prefer a first-person narrative to draw the user in. Use lots of videos and infographics to delight your users. And make sure content is accessible and closed captioned where appropriate. Finally, highlight your brand and invite users to explore more at the end of your story. Here are some other best practices we recommend. I'll leave these on for a second for you to review, but the long and the short of it is try to build compelling content that users will find engaging. You're all master storytellers in your own domains. Hopefully, some of the tips we've covered today will help up-level your content and delight your users for years to come. Our last topic for this section is about web stories and your website. As Raunak mentioned earlier, a web story is nothing but a web page. And just like a web page on your blog or website, it has a URL to reach it. What that means is that you can embed your story right within your blog, just like you would other content. This way, users that visit your blog or website can actually enjoy web stories right then and there and don't have to wait around for it to surface in Discover or Google search. We challenge you to try to make the story experience more fun and engaging from start to finish. Here are a couple of snapshots from our upcoming playbook that helps you showcase web stories on your website. Entry points help you incorporate web stories right into your website so that you can reach new audiences and help readers connect with content that they love. Find the style that fits your brand and makes it easy for anyone to connect readers with the content that they love. All right, that's the end of our content for today. Hope you found that interesting and useful.
So thank you, Raunak and Shishir, for walking us through all the basics of web stories. Now that you all know what web stories are and what the best practices are for creating them, we're going to head out into our breakout groups where you will get a mini hands-on training using one of 2 tools to create web stories. Just as there are many ways to create a website, there are many ways to create a web story. Based on the questions you filled out in your registration for this event, we sorted you into one of two groups, either the Web Stories for WordPress group or the MakeStories group. Both groups will cover similar content, just with different tools that are suited for your needs. Now, before we enter the breakouts, here are some quick ground rules. For the breakouts, we'll be heading off of this event page and into two separate Google Meet sessions. We ask that you please keep yourself on mute throughout the duration of the session so that our presenters can focus on walking you through the tools. We'll keep our cameras on, but feel no pressure to keep your camera on throughout the session. Unlike the rest of the sessions, in these breakouts, you'll be able to ask questions by using the raise your hand function in Google Meet. The presenters will call on folks with questions as they go through the tools. So feel free to unmute and ask your question aloud, or just type it into the chat once you're called on. Now we're going to head off into those breakout sessions. If you don't remember what session you're in, please just check the email we sent you before the event. The WordPress session is for WordPress users, and the MakeStories session is for everyone else. You should also see these sessions automatically added to your calendar, so feel free to join in from there, or use the short links on screen now. And we'll see you back here in Q&A. All right, see you in a bit.